Iqiniso podcast. Welcome. Realize the truth with and about software testing. Hello. I'm Stefan Lukkermans and I'm going to be your host for this episode of the Bona Iqiniso podcast. Introduction. For the first episode of our podcast, we have chosen the title Why Bona Iqiniso. And on top of that, we also would like to explain in our first episode what you can expect from us in our podcasts, the way that they are built up, and we think that Bona Iqiniso really is necessary. The reason why is that within software testing there is a sort of duality. You have the way that we are doing software testing, and we can think that we are doing a very good job and that we are finding all the necessary bugs and that the product at the end will be a good product. But then you also have that other view of how people look at software testing, software testers, and in fact also want to know, hey, can we trust these guys? Are they doing what they mean to do? So the problem is that duality, it's in fact already known for a lot of years. And you can say it's like quality assurance and quality control, where quality assurance is everything about the processes and how people are perceiving software testing. And where on the other hand, quality control, it's the real job, it's the software testing on itself. Now, do we have a solution for this duality? And that's also one of the main reasons why we started with Bona Iqiniso. Yes, there are solutions, a lot of solutions, but we don't have one integrated solution. We don't have one framework or one tool or one methodology that combines external views and internal views, quality assurance and quality control. That's the reason why we say that Bona Iqiniso is necessary. But how can we solve that duality? Well, already in ancient Rome, they had their god Janus, who had two faces, one looking forward to the future and one looking backward to the past. So that, for instance, is already also a duality that is applicable on software testing. We have to look at what we did before in software testing and how we are going to do software testing in the future. Everything in our life has that duality. Go left, go right, go up, go down, yes or no. So solving that duality, for a lot of things we do that automatically, but apparently for software testing, every time when you say to a software testing, oh, I'm going to explain you a process, I'm going to explain you how to do your job, somehow they are offended and they don't want to do that. And that's why we want to come up with Bona Iqiniso, because Bona Iqiniso can give a view on that a software tester is not used to. By the way, Bona Iqiniso, it's a Zulu phrase, and it means realize the truth. And that's also why the complete title of this podcast is Bona Iqiniso, realize the truth about and with software testing. So again, our podcast is all about that duality and how you can integrate both worlds so that you have one solution and that in fact you don't even have to think anymore about how am I perceived by others or how am I going to do my job. And for that we started with a methodology. Now there are a lot of software development methodologies and also frameworks. Think of dynamic software development, RUP, RAP, whatever. There are so many. Waterfall, V-model, And then you have the frameworks like an agile framework, agile software development framework, Scrum. You have Lean. But the thing is, they are all about software development. And somewhere buried inside there is software testing. So in my 30 years experience, I have never encountered a methodology or a framework that says this is only for software testers. This is built from the ground with and by and for software testers. And that's Bona Iqiniso. Now, our podcast will always have the same structure. So the part that we are in now, it's called the introduction. And the whole methodology of Bona Iqiniso is built upon a pillar has 4 parts. So we always will talk about the context, which is a very high level view of what are the problems, what are the possible solutions that we can have. And then there is a part which is called the concept, where we explain one solution a little bit more in depth, like what are the main components for the solution. And the third part is then the implementation. So then we are going to talk about, yeah, how do we implement it? What are the things that can happen, the risks that you can run, what are the do's and the don'ts, and stuff like that. And then the fourth part, it's always verification. We always will tell you somehow how you can verify that what we have explained within the podcast, that you can verify it, and that in fact you can see the effect of it. And then a last part, we always give a summary where we give like the key points of what we discussed in the podcast. So that's how every podcast in of the Bona Iqiniso podcast will be. The context. The context of Bona Iqiniso has 3 parts. First of all, the methodology part. We choose for a methodology, and we will come back more in depth later, but it's good to know that a methodology contains all components necessary, whether you are in software testing or out software testing. Within that methodology, we also will have methods that we are going to describe. All of those methods, in fact, they are describing activities, processes, tasks that you will have to execute. And for that, we also wanted to mimic, in fact, human behavior. No matter who you are, if I give you a task, there are a number of fixed steps that you will go through till you can finish and deliver that task. And that's what we want to mimic in Bona Iqiniso, so that it becomes also easier to understand and also easier to apply in what you are doing. And also a methodology. Why? Because we want to make people better. We want you to be aware that you can do better than what you did yesterday. If tomorrow you get up, you will have to think, I can do better than yesterday. And the reason also why we use a methodology is that we have within a methodology a part which is called the paradigm. Well, it's a fancy word just to say that we have a sort of big repository of things where we can get our information from, like international standards, and all of that will help us to structure and organize Bona Iqiniso in the correct way. And then, of course, the content of Bona Iqiniso, and that's the second part of the context, is that we want to do things about the realization of the truth about software testing, about quality assurance. And there it's key to understand that we need to know what quality is. Everything that we do circles that one little word called quality. Within Bona Iqiniso, we will have a framework that handles this. although perhaps you may think it's theoretical, that it's boring, and you may even think it's not important for you, I challenge you to just bear with us and have a look at this part within Bona Iqiniso, because it will widen your view and it will give you a look behind the scene. And to have that look, it's important because then you also can learn how people are looking at you. And just that knowledge will open a sort of channel of communication that will allow you to become a better software tester. And the third part in the context of Bona Iqiniso is that we want to realize things about the truth uh, with software testing. So we also want the methodology to contain things that will teach you and guide you on how to do good software testing. But we don't want to discriminate any software development methodology or framework. Bona Iqiniso will be valid for waterfall, V-model, agile, lean, agile, and we are also pretty sure that it will be valid for any development approach that you may come up in the future. We don't want a battle like there is between waterfall and agile and big transitions from waterfall to agile. It's all very cumbersome, it's very expensive, and our idea is in fact that you don't have to battle to become better. You can do it very iterative. You can do it with little baby steps. So getting better, you are that's not a big bang. It's not done just in one go. So that's what Bona Iqiniso is about. And we also don't want to throw away the baby with the water in the bathtub. That point, if you look at waterfall and agile, for instance, both sides are saying this is our Bible, this is how we have to do it, and that's not how you do it. You have to look at what's inside and see what are the good things that we can reuse. That's what you need to do. Don't throw away your baby. We reuse, we harvest the good things and build from there. We don't impose. We don't want you to adopt Bona Iqiniso, unless perhaps you are very, very junior and you are starting, then perhaps it's a good idea to just follow Bona Iqiniso step by step. But on the other hand, what we really want to be, it's like a library of good practices, a library of things that you can do to become a better software tester. And if you don't want to do everything within Bona Iqiniso, so be it, as long as you remember the fact that you also are perceived in a certain way and that you can have like a balance between what people think of you and how you are doing what you are doing. That's the context of Bona Iqiniso. It's a methodology, it's to realize the truth about software testing, and it's to realize the truth with software testing. The concept. So the concept for Bona Iqiniso is built on a number of items, of which the first one is that we want Bona Iqiniso to be for everyone. And with everyone we mean whether you are a novice software tester or whether you are very experienced, both should get something from Bona Iqiniso to help them with their daily job. And for that, we have chosen to use something out of the world of psychology, which is called cognitive behavioral therapy. And it will help us to describe, in fact, Bona Iqiniso in such a way that everyone can have a benefit from it. Cognitive behavioral therapy is, in fact, based on the way that you think will lead to the way that you feel, and the way that you feel will ultimately determine, in fact, how you act on certain things. So if you start or you think bad about something, you will immediately already feel bad about it, and then your behavior will be more defensive instead of being more open. But on the other hand, if you think very positively about something, then you also will have feel like a motivation to do things in a different way. And ultimately, your behavior will reflect that and will also be more positive than you can think when it was a bad idea. Now, when you are a novice, and cognitive behavioral therapy also already has that in itself, there are two distinct, let's say, paths for behavioral therapy. The first is when you are a novice, you will feel that you need a lot of guidance, that you need someone to tell you, to guide you, to mentor you. And that in fact is called, you will have more like a rational behavior. And therefore, Bona Iqiniso will contain a lot of information, a lot of guidance that perhaps a more experienced software tester will not need. Now, when you are more experienced, sometimes you start cutting corners, and once you start doing that, you are growing to be more cognitive, intuitive. So you are more following your intuition about situations that you get in, and then you will act upon that. But anyhow, you always can fall back on what we have within Bona Iqiniso. So that's the first concept, that Bona Iqiniso is for everyone, whether you are novice or experienced. The second thing is that Bona Iqiniso needs to be very structured and organized. And also there we use cognitive behavioral therapy, because there are a lot of therapists helping people, and they are always based on the same, let's call it a framework. There is a doctor called Meichenbaum. He came up with his 4 bears. But in fact, what those 4 bears tell you is that if you receive a task and you have to do a certain task, that you first will try to grab the context of the task. You will first receive the information, make the planning, make sure that you understand very well what it is about. And then you go to the second step, where you start to think about the solution for the task at hand. You will create like a concept of a solution. So in other words, in software development, for instance, it would be like you are designing your software. And then the next part is that once you have planned it and you have designed it, is that you will implement it. So you will create the code. The implementation phase, that's where you really create the solution for the task that you have received. But in the end, you need to verify it. That means that the fourth phase is that you have to check that your end result, it's really what you also have received as a task. And the reason why we are following these 4 steps, or why we are talking about these 4 steps, is that everything within Bona Iqiniso is always explained in those 4 steps. We always will give first the context, then the concept, then how it is implemented, and then how it is verified. And even this podcast, it's constructed that way. Now, we put one thing in front and one thing at the back. We always will start with an introduction, just to show you, because we are always talking about the smaller part of Bona Iqiniso. So we first want to introduce where that smaller part fits into the bigger whole. And then at the end, we always will give like a summary, so that you have like quick card, and it in fact will be the basis for the quick cards that we will have in Bona Iqiniso, where you have like a small checklist of points that you can say, okay, check, check, check. These are the things that needed to be done. Now the third part of our concept is, and in fact it's very simple. Bona Iqiniso is a methodology. So we are going to use what a methodology is, the spirit of a methodology, in fact, as a concept for Bona Iqiniso. strange to say that you use a methodology concept for a methodology, no? Of course, that's going to be our solution. Now, the definition of a methodology, and I'm just going to read it, it's the systematic theoretical analysis of the methods applied to a field of study. So it's all about theory, it's about what we are doing within a certain field of study, and our field of study will be software testing. The rest of the definition goes, it comprises the theoretical analysis of the body of methods and principles associated with a branch of knowledge. Typically, it encompasses concepts such as paradigm, theoretical model, phases, and quantitative or qualitative techniques. So these are the 5 building blocks for a methodology. You have your phases, your life cycle, you have your qualitative techniques, quantitative techniques, theoretical model, and paradigm. Now paradigm, it's perhaps a fancy word. Paradigm is nothing more than a distinct set of concepts or thought patterns, including theories, research methods, postulates, examples, and international standards for what constitutes legitimate contributions to a field of expertise. So for instance, if we are going to talk about the software testing process, we are going to use the software ISO standard for software testing. The beauty of it is that a methodology, in fact, it's theoretical, but the paradigm contains a lot of material, certainly within Bona Iqiniso, it contains a lot of material that will help you to implement it in your organization in a pragmatic way. So it will contain examples, but most of all and most important part of the paradigm is that we will have implementation packages for each practice, for each method that we describe. We will have a set of documents and examples on how to implement that method in your organization. So that's the concept for Bona Iqiniso. It's very simple because we say that a methodology has a concept of a methodology, but the methodology itself is just the concept. In the next part we will go in on how to really implement this. The implementation. How do you implement a methodology? In fact, it's an easy question because in the definition of a methodology, we already learned that there are 5 parts in a methodology. The first part are the phases. So your methodology will have a number of phases or parts, which is called in fact the life cycle. Most of the time it will represent the life cycle of a product or software development. But in our case it will represent the life cycle of software testing. So from the moment that you in fact know that you have to start testing a product to the moment that in fact the product is in production and the warranty phase is already long gone and in fact the project itself is stopped. So the end of your testing life cycle. The second part in your methodology are the qualitative techniques, and for that we need to know what in fact we mean with quality. And that's also easy because within Bona Iqiniso itself, within the paradigm, we defined a number of frameworks. We also defined a number of reference models all about quality. That's the way that we are going to implement qualitative techniques in Bona Iqiniso. And they are not only about implementing quality, they are also there to implement how we do an assessment of that quality and also how we do an improvement of that quality. We have a number of frameworks and reference models within Bona Iqiniso that will implement the qualitative techniques of Bona Iqiniso. Then we have the quantitative techniques. That's the third part of the methodology. And it's all about numbers, about measurement. And in fact, if you don't measure, you don't know. It's Lord Kelvin. It's an expression that Lord Kelvin made To measure is to know, and to know means that you at least can do something about it if it doesn't go right. We have within Bona Iqiniso a measurement framework, and we also have a measurement model, and of course we also will have implementation packages for measuring quality. Those are the quantitative techniques. Then the fourth part in methodology are the methods. Now, I'm not going to tell a lot about those methods, but you have to see a method as a process. Whether you are talking about a process or an activity or a task or something that you want to do or a service that you want to deliver, they always have more or less the same kind of approach. You are describing who is delivering input, who is your supplier, what are the input work products that you need, what are the steps in your activity or process, and in the end, what is being delivered from that method, which are the work products coming out, which are the people receiving the work that you have done. And again, for that, Bona Iqiniso has a framework, has a lot of reference models ready. Now, the fifth part within the methodology, it's the paradigm. And we already mentioned it a couple of times. For us, the paradigm is like a repository of goodies. A repository where we put everything that we base Bona Iqiniso on. All the ISO standards are there. Although we are not putting the ISO standards in, they are very heavily copyrighted. But what we will do is we will always have like a reference in our documentation towards those standards, so that you always know where Abraham got the mustard. A second part in our paradigm are the frameworks that we are going to use. So we want the structured approach to introduce Bona Iqiniso into an organization. That's done by having a quality assurance framework. We want it to be organized. We do that by having a quality framework. We want to know how we can measure the quality, so we have also a measurement framework. Then we have a data-driven approach. We also need a framework for data. If you are testing, you will have data to put inside or to execute your test cases. We have a testing framework, because we also will need to know how to do testing. And there are a number of frameworks out there that we can directly use, but what we will do is just collect best practices as they come in. We never intend to be complete, but we do intend to be accurate and correct. Then another one is that we also will have like a reference framework where we have a number of models so that we can discuss all in the same level using the same terminology, and that we can use those meta models in fact to express certain parts of Bona Iqiniso. We will have an assessment framework to assess or to learn us how to assess the quality within Bona Iqiniso. We will have an improvement framework that will teach us how we can do better every day. And now we have also a risk framework which will tell us everything about risk. But we are not going to take a traditional approach. For us, it's about software testing. So we are going to use the same duality we have in Bona Iqiniso, where you have like the outside of software testing and the inside of software testing. So we will be looking at risks towards software testing and risks coming from software testing. And we will also have a little bit of different approach for those risks coming to software testing. In nomenclature, it's called risk-based testing, but we will just be doing it a little bit different so that it gets more meaning, and I think it will be more correct. For instance, we have another classification method for risks, and we also will be using, risk-based testing is used to estimate how thoroughly you need to test. But instead of thoroughly means more test cases, we will just say no, we know that we have the correct number of test cases, but we will have more data that we want to use in those test cases. So for us, more thoroughly means that we are testing with more data in the same test cases. And then the last one, it's a reporting framework so that we can make sure that software testing, that we know inside software testing everything is going, that within software development we know everything is going, and that we also know company-wide how it's going. I already mentioned that we also use reference models, so that's the third part that we will have in our paradigm. We have a number of reference models that link to the frameworks. We have a Confluence page, the Bona Iqiniso Confluence page, where we have all the information available, where we also have these podcasts sitting. And then the most important part, in fact, of the paradigm is that we have implementation packages. So for every method that we want to introduce via Bona Iqiniso, we also will create an implementation package. And an implementation package will contain something like a template, a rationale why we are doing that method, a description of the process of the work products. We also will have guidelines, checklists, we will have risk templates, we will have measurement templates, and then of course we will also have examples. And all of that in fact should give enough foot in the organization to make Bona Iqiniso easily and, let us say, effortlessly implementable inside an organization. And that's in fact what we want, is that you can take whatever you want out of Bona Iqiniso, but that you also know that it's founded in a solid base, and that if you are using it, that you don't have to worry about why or how or who, but it's all there written down. So that's the way that we want to implement Bona Iqiniso. The verification. How do you verify that Bona Iqiniso is implemented correctly in the organization? In fact, we are told that we always will have this chapter on how to verify it, but the thing is in fact that you first have to decide which parts of Bona Iqiniso you want to introduce into the organization. And because every method that we describe within Bona Iqiniso also has its own measurements, also has its own assessment templates with it, it's very easy. You need a list of all the methods that you use from Bona Iqiniso, and then you have to also execute the assessment for each of those methods. That's how you make sure that the methods from Bona Iqiniso are implemented well. On the other hand, use the reporting framework in Bona Iqiniso to report everything towards the management, because that will make sure that you get the buy-in from management. Once they see those dashboards, those reporting coming from Bona Iqiniso, and you mention to them that, okay, this is coming from a methodology that we follow, it's up to them to have their buy-in and to make the decisions which methods in fact to implement. That's where the quality assurance framework comes in. It's part of Bona Iqiniso, and in fact it makes that's the connection between the internal of software testing and the external of software testing. We have a quality assurance loop, and we have a software testing loop, and they are both entwined, and they both need to be done in a correct way. But the third part of the quality assurance framework is in fact how to evaluate, how to score how well we are doing the software testing according to the external of software testing, which is then the management or the organization. And it's up to them in fact to declare this is enough, we don't need to improve more on this method, or it's up to them to declare, okay, we also other methods need to be implemented, or this method is not yet enough, we need to improve on that method. And then you will start a new continuous improvement cycle within software testing for that certain method. But we will come back to that when we are discussing the quality assurance framework. I know it's perhaps a little bit quick now, but that's how you verify the correct implementation of the Bona Iqiniso methodology. Summary. So first we discussed why do we need Bona Iqiniso, and the answer was because there is a certain duality about software testing. You have the way that software testing is viewed at by people outside software testing, and then there is the view of the people that are doing the software testing. And at this moment, although we have quality assurance and we have quality control, there is no methodology which in fact explains both together so that they are integrated, and so that in fact you don't have to worry about what you are doing in within software testing, and that you also don't have to think about how are people perceiving the work that I'm doing. What we use is a methodology. A methodology is made of some methods that you are executing within a life cycle. We are using qualitative techniques, quantitative techniques, and we have a paradigm in the methodology which in fact contains so much material that you can easily that you can use it to easily implement Bona Iqiniso in the organization. This was the Bona Iqiniso podcast. We hope you join us for the next episode.